All right. My guest today is David Willson. I've known David since Hardy Junior High School when I was in the seventh grade and he was in the eighth grade. I played bad alto sax and he played trumpet. Uh, we went on through Hardy together and a year apart, and then to Provine High School, and then I followed him to Ole Miss. Jimmy Ferguson, the band director at the time, was busy around our school inviting people to come to Ole Miss and give them tiny scholarships that made it possible for those of us in families with little or no money to attend college. David, I don't remember exactly the tuition you paid your first year, but my first year, after I subtracted the $50 a semester for marching band, uh, I think my tuition bill was $225.
You know, for some reason I thought mine was 240 and I subtracted 60, or I subtracted 60 and it was 240. I can't remember, but somewhere around like that.
Yeah, like that anyway. Anyway, we're familiar with each other and have known each other since that time. We don't talk every day, but we do a good bit. David and I played uh, in two or three rock bands together. One of them was the Carltons, and that was in high school. And we didn't make a lot of money, but we were up on stage getting paid to play. And I think that's probably what was important. Later on in college, we both were members of a group called Uncle Sam. Now, Uncle Sam, as far as we were concerned, was serious financial business. And I don't know about you, David, but I learned a lot from the business side of that, watching Tom McCool and how he set things up and distributed the money and made sure everybody was happy and paid for all our expenses. And we still made somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 a weekend, which, in 1972 was big money.
There was.
Yeah, and I thought I was financially independent until I got out of school and learned that $100 a week wasn't going to make it. Um, anyway, David and I have known each other since that time. David, you recently retired as band director at Ole Miss after 32 years. Is that correct?
Something like that.
And you retired for health reasons. And how has your life changed since your retirement, David?
Well, I fell over unexpectedly from spontaneous internal bleeding, and it incapacitated me for a whole year. It took me a year to learn how to walk, and I was just getting, I don't think I'll ever be normal, about 70 or 80%. And then I had to have a pacemaker replacement, and the replacement got infected, and a one night stay turned into 8 nights. And then I'm on my 15th day of home health care, and I'm coming out of it, but it affected me pretty bad. Um, I was planning on retiring pretty quickly anyway, but it forced me to go ahead and do it. I realize now I probably went about, as much as I loved helping young people, I probably went about 10 years too long. It robbed me from having some time to play and enjoy life a little bit. And I hope I get a few more years.
I'm sure you will. You do look like you've lost a little hairline there.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. uh, I want you to tell me the story of David Wilson, the wiki version.
Well, I don't have a lot to say. My mother was institutionalized at Whitfield Mental Hospital when I was very young. And I don't really have any memory of that. So I don't have any memory of my mother. My dad was a blue collar guy. And to everybody else, he was real cordial and funny. But at home, he was pretty brutal. I can understand now because he had lots of brothers and sisters in the 50s telling him what to do and how to do it. And I'm sure he was under a lot of stress. And somehow, I think a couple of his brothers and sisters insisted that his children get involved in something. He bought a pawn shop cornet or a used cornet somewhere, and my sister played it one year. And then the next year I got in a band. Instead of playing something I wanted, she played it in eighth grade band. I played in seventh. I tried to quit band in the ninth grade, and my father made a statement: "Son, you're too young to make that decision. The rest is history." I was planning on being an auto mechanic or something, and Higdon Kenny, our high school band director, said, "What are you going to do next year?" And I said, "I'm going to go to Hines and take auto mechanics or something." He said, "No, you're not." And the next thing I know, Jimmy Ferguson, the band director at Ole Miss, is down. My dad shows up. I thought I was in trouble. He asked me to play a solo. He wanted me to play an all-state solo, but I played the Sounds of Silence I learned in jazz band and a couple of scales. And he asked about financial aid. If you make less than 10,000, my dad said I make less than 5. And he said, "How do you make it?" And he said, "Oh, we make it," but we barely did. And the next thing I know, I'm standing in line at Ole Miss. It could have been Oklahoma, Paris. I'd never really been there. And I had two things motivating me. I didn't want to go back home and live in that environment, and I didn't want to go to Vietnam because I had a cousin get shot up pretty bad over there, and it scared me. I had no ambition at all. I just didn't want to go back home. And I got out and I couldn't give myself away because during the oil embargo, and I took Independence High School. They didn't have a band. They hadn't had one for 5 years. I started one over in a double wide trailer. And I was embarrassed to wear my name tag at state convention. But now I look back, it's the single best thing that happened to me because it forced me to learn how to teach the basics. If those kids got anything, it had to come from me. Then I did 2 years at Greenwood Junior High, 7 years in Columbus at Caldwell High School. And that was an inner city type school. Shouldn't have had a band. Then I went to Clinton, suburb of Jackson, as you know, upper middle class for 6. Then I got a call to come up to Ole Miss. None of that I foresee. I just had a fear of failure, and I worked pretty hard at it. And then I was here 32 years, and here I am.
Well, it just based on my own personal experience, David, it seems like you figured out pretty quickly that if you don't teach beginners, nobody's going to do it for you in most small towns. It took me a little longer than it did you to figure out that basic fact. And, I think a lot of us left college, and maybe even some of them still do, believing that you can conduct your students to excellence.
That's
You
just
know what I mean?
100%, 100%. If I had $1 for everybody says, "Oh, I can't deal with the young ones. I don't want to teach beginners." I've judged in South Alabama at Troy, and there's a lot of people conducting middle school bands with masters in conducting with their tuxes and tails, looking better than Freddie Fennell, and the band sounding horrible. I learned that first year, it forced me because I didn't have anything else to rely upon, that if they did it, I had to teach it to them. And it's the single most important thing in band in our country. If it doesn't happen at the beginner band level, it doesn't happen at middle school, high school, college, or even in industry. And I wrote a book about it. I did 2 seminars at the Midwest because we're flippant about it, especially in our college curriculums. A lot of people teaching there are very brilliant, good people, but they've never really done it. But it's the single most important part of our business. And you're right. Most of us, it takes a while to learn, but I was forced to learn that my first year. So I took beginner band real serious.
Well, I think that was fortunate that, well, not just fortunate, it was pretty doggone smart that you figured that out on your own. I I remember thinking, very vividly that if I conducted with the right emotion and the right patterns, that I could teach those kids to be better musicians. And life just didn't work out that way.
Heck no. Heck no. I remember in college, I was sitting back there and they said, this is emotion. You got to feel the music. And a couple of the trumpet players reached up and rubbed on their music.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm sure if somebody watched me do a clinic, I'd say the first beat's piano, the next one's MP, the next one's MF, and the fourth beat is loud. And I just took all the, I guess, esotericness out of it to make it understandable to get to the musical goal that I wanted quicker. It's just nuts and bolts, and there's not a whole lot left to it.
I remember also, my first year of teaching, thinking about my methods classes. and how easy it was to teach my friends to play flute or clarinet, but they weren't 11 and 12 years old. And when
Right.
I had those 11 and 12-year-olds, they didn't understand anything that I tried to tell them, so I had to find a different way to tell
100%. 100%. And most people give up. They'll just say, oh, they're not going to get it. But if you're going to have a band and you really want a band, you realize that you got to hang on to them. You'll go around the mountain to the left, to the right, over it, through it. But you don't give up and you find another way. I remember my first day of getting horns, and I just so naively said, open your cases. Well, the clarinet case was upside down, and
them.
it bounced on
Yeah.
the floor and broke the tenon joint. So from that day on, I wrote top on all the cases, and I wouldn't let them open them until I looked at them and made sure the flip, whatever you call them, were in the right way. I learned so much because we weren't taught it, and
No.
I really think that the people teaching those methods class, they're good people, but they never did that, and so they just talk about the beryllium head joint versus the solid silver versus the nickel. They don't have a clue how to get Stinky to sit in the seat and behave and want it.
Or whether to get low B foot joints on your beginner flutes or not.
That's right.
Yeah.
Open hole. Right.
Well,
Uh,
tell me about your first year as director at Ole Miss.
it was one of the most eye-opening, stressful things that I've ever done. The first 3 years were unbelievable. The band was down to 138. Morale was just all over the place. And I went in there and tried to talk to them about having a band, and the discipline was it's just bad. There was about 60 balked music majors and about 60 people that just wanted to drink and say rock and roll, and 5 or 6 good kids. And the more I pressed them to stay and to do what they were supposed to do, I had to finally, and it's against my philosophy, dismiss a few of them. I thought it was going to cause the Palace revolt, but in the end, most of the people that on my evaluation should, about 30 out of the 138 said I should have done it a long time ago. And then we started building. And I tried to sell the kids on bringing positive recognition of what they were doing through creating excellence while serving the university. I treated them with all the dignity and respect that I could. We went from, I got up to my fourth or fifth year to 182. And finally, I think the biggest one I ever had was 302 for about a day, but I stayed at 299. I had a pretty low dropout rate. 2 years in my 19 of doing the marching band, I lost nobody. And most of the years it was just 3 or 4, and that was people that decided they were going to miss a game. I don't put people out, I don't give up. But if they thought they were bigger than the team, it was over. One year I lost 7, and I started questioning myself. But the only way I could compete with my peers was to hang on to kids. Ole Miss is not as big as, let's say, LSU. And then our Greek population is almost 40%. Mississippi State's like 20%. And if we're the same size, that means they have 20 more percent of the population to pull from. So if it's 20 people per 1,000 and they've got 2 more, that's 40 more people. So I treated them with dignity and respect. Every kid was equal, and they knew that. I tried to make rehearsals fun, but at the same time, with good instruction. And I think I held on to them pretty good.
What was your recruiting pitch to high school seniors that you wanted to come to Ole Miss?
I told them that every college band is going to have some sort of excellence. If you're going to be in one, you want to be with one where every person was equal. You're going to be treated with dignity and respect, that the director had empathy with what you were doing in all kinds of weather, stadium situations, can't leave, can't eat. But I treated them, I just said, if you want to go somewhere where you're treated with dignity and respect and everybody's equal and you're watched out for, we can create an environment that you want to be in. We have that environment. And that's what I sold it on. And Ole Miss is a good state university. It's not Harvard, but it's a pretty good state university, and it's got a beautiful campus.
I always thought, when I first went there, they told us that the colors were red for Harvard and blue for Yale. Do you remember that story?
Somewhat, yes.
Yeah. I just thought that was a little pretentious, but how many kids did you manage to get each year? By get, I mean to actually enroll.
Well, it took me a while to get my bearings on that. I know LSU, the guy told me one time they tried to start about 110. And I think the university was bigger. And I knew that if I could just get 80 new people a year and hang on to them, I wouldn't have a band as big, but I would have one almost as big and could compete. And I think that's about what I did one year. I think I got up to 100. But when I got here, the university wasn't much more than 11 or 12,000. Now it's like 15 or 16 on campus. If you look online, it says 22, but that's part-time people that own the 5 satellite campuses and all that kind of stuff. But at that time, 80, and then I tried to kick it up. But I thought 300 for us at the time I was here was phenomenal.
Absolutely. If I remember correctly, when we were there, the enrollment was a little under 8,000.
Correct.
And I didn't see it getting a whole lot bigger, but evidently some growth has occurred. Because, the last time I was there to visit you, I didn't know anywhere. I couldn't recognize hardly anything except maybe the Grove.
That's right.
And had a hard time getting around on campus. Um, how much did honor bands and clinics play in your recruiting?
Jim, I'd say some, but everybody has this magical bullet about recruiting. I chased a couple of kids all over the state my first couple of years. I drove down to see this all-state tuba player in the Jackson area about 4 or 5 times. And I went down and auditioned him, offered him a scholarship, took it down there. He signed it. First day of camp, he wasn't there. Same thing with a girl from Clinton that I had taught. And it taught me that if a student doesn't have some interest in attending that university, after about the second contact with them, if there was some kind of reciprocal feeling there, it was almost a waste of time. So if a kid wanted to go to Cleveland Institute, major in trumpet performance, I'd say good luck to you. So if I did an honor band and the student really enjoyed it, most of the time if they had an interest in Ole Miss, they would come see me and talk to me. It took me a while to realize going into a high school band hall or community college, most people say, I want to see all your seniors. After about 3 years, I'd say, if any of you are interested in Ole Miss, I'll talk to you after rehearsal. And it just cut down on all that. My best recruiting were the students in the band. They'd go home and tell their peers that they enjoyed it and had a good time, and that the instruction was good and it meant something rather than getting barked at all the time.
Right, right. I've discovered pretty much the same thing in my own teaching, that the kids that you teach will either recruit for you or against you.
That's right.
One or the other. Um, what were your goals for your students? Not just music majors, but say any kid in band at Ole Miss.
Well, that's a good question and a hard one. I wanted them to feel like they were part of a team and a mission. I wrote the beginning of our handbook, the band mission. It was to bring positive recognition to yourselves through creating excellence while serving the University of Mississippi. Let's face it, the marching band should be the center of game day spirit. Kids got on a black plastic hat while their friends have on a blazer and a partying in the end zone. If they don't have some kind of mission that they feel like they're part of, it's hard for them to go out there and sweat and not want to quit. So I harped on that every Friday, starting about halfway through my first year. I'd say, look, don't forget what we're working for, because if you're getting beat by 2 touchdowns, those kids get pretty down, and constantly tell them on what they're doing. And when we started our pep rally in the Grove, marching from the Grove to the stadium, if one kid pulled his cell phone out to do a selfie, I was going to hear about it. And I told him, I said, it's not that I'm trying to catch you doing anything. It's that you're representing the university that day, and you're no longer a college student. You're a servant of the university. And most of all, you're a servant of yourself. You hurt yourself, you hurt the team. And it never was perfect, but I thought we got it where the citizenship was pretty good. For them to leave it just a little bit better than it was, to respect each other in the band. I wouldn't let anybody correct anybody else. I had no officers. I didn't have section leaders. Bands go overboard about having this student leadership. Most of the time I saw that it was people barking at each other, and it just created immature poppycock. So I just said leadership is by example. It doesn't matter if you're 2 or 92. If you're the first one to get your horn up and try hard and put out the energy, you're a leader by example. And that's what I did. Just try to make people as good as they could possibly be and treat them with dignity and respect that I never saw really.
So you said you started out with about 160 kids and ended up with 299. How many of those were music majors?
Started out with 138, Jim.
38, I'm sorry.
Uh, my first year with the college wind band, I think 40 to 45% were music ed majors. And I think my last couple of years, we were in the 90%. Now, the exact number, we're not a huge department. We ran somewhere between 65 and 100 instrumental music majors, which was big for us. One year we had 13 to 15 student teachers, and that's big for us. I was proud of that. And of course, all of them don't go on to student teach. They'll go into elementary music or theory or get married and become a office tech. Who knows? But I was proud of that. I think at the end, I had somewhere around 155 practicing band directors, but that changes on a yearly basis.
Still pretty impressive.
Yeah.
How many band directors would you say that you have had a hand in helping prepare over the 32 years or so you were there?
Wow. I worked with a lot of people that weren't from here as well. I'd say 200 or 300. I worked, my mission was to help band and not ask for anything in return. And usually it got me some kudos. The SEC started something 5 or 10 years ago to help minority bands. I was 2 or 3 times early in my career, I was the only Caucasian in the room because I didn't care how poor the band was, what the racial makeup was. I was trying to help the band and the director. And some of those moments are some of my most memorable and proud moments. Nobody knew about them, but I did it for the right reason.
Well, you knew about them. I think that's probably the important thing. And what was some of the achievements that you feel like were high points during your tenure at Ole Miss?
Well, it was my 4th year when we took the band to Vanderbilt, and we had grown to about 182, and we were playing something coming across the, and we got a standing ovation. And man, I'll never forget that as long as I live. It was fantastic. That was really good. I played at state convention my 8th or 10th year. Probably wasn't as good as I thought it was, but it went over very, very good. I was teacher of the year at the university. I got the highest award, service to students. I spoke at the honors convocation. I was on the cover of SBO magazine. Those were personal. I was president of Phi Beta Mu International, and some of that's falderall, but mainly watching my students do well. That was the highlight of my career. I wrote a few articles, let's say 12 to 15, and I had my couple of warm-ups, my little beginner band book published, but mainly watching my students develop and the band get better.
I've got several of your articles up on my Substack site if anybody would like to see those. What was your budget at Ole Miss when you started?
You know, that's a very difficult question. I know in my interview, there was a separate budget. There was an office budget and there was a athletic travel budget, so to speak. The office budget was under 20,000. That means we had to buy postage, pay the secretary's salary. Instrument replacement was budgeted $1,000. It was pathetic. And I mentioned that during the interview, and they didn't believe me. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I get more than that at Clinton. And they got mad at me. And they said, well, come up with a budget. And I said, I can. If you call me, I'll have one ready. They said, no, right now. So in a restaurant, I get a napkin, and I finally just threw it up there and I said, a minimum of $25,000 increase. And when they called, they told me to give me 15,000 increase and $1,000 more than I made in Clinton. I said, call the next person. And the next day they offered me 20,000 increase with a promise to raise five, and what I would make at Clinton basically on 12 months. And I took it. Um, but eventually, that's why I decided to fundraise. And I got it up to where I had a couple of million almost in dollars and about 3 million in estate gifts. And it gave me a little bit more money to operate on, but nothing like Alabama and those places. Athletics eventually took over all. I didn't have money, but they took over all travel, and whatever was left there was left in the budget. So we probably had around $100,000 to buy equipment and pay postage and recruit. And then I had another 70 to 80 in endowed money, that not endowed money, interest off that money to spend every year, but nothing like any of my colleagues. We were the lowest in the SEC.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant increase, and says a lot about the changing culture that you brought about, while you were there. Um, David, I just finished your book, and it was inspiring to say the least. And I was skeptical about the format when you first told me about it, but after going through it, it really made a lot of sense, especially from a teacher's perspective, about how you put the takeaways from each story at the end to give people an idea about what you learned and what they might be able to learn from it at the same time. Whose idea was the book, David?
Well, I have a former student from Columbus, Mississippi. There was just a ninth grader, and she talked like Mr. Bill on Saturday Night Live, real high. And she's now a state Supreme Court justice, and she politely and in a Christian manner and professionally nagged me to death to do it. I told her no, and I meant no. But she said, will you dictate it? And so I did dictate it. And I would write an outline, and for 3 months I walked around my yard talking into the phone. And when there was a aha moment, I said, this is what I learned from it, so that I wouldn't do it the same time. I mean, the same way over and over again. I think that's all of us, even an auto mechanic learns from their mistakes. A lot of people don't, but I did. I wish that more people would ask for mentoring early on. It would save them a lot of heartache. Surgeons go to school 4 years as an undergrad, and then they go to medical school 4 years, then they intern in some clinic for 5 before they get their own patient. Well, we go to school 4 years and take half of our curriculum in basics, and 80% of our music curriculum don't ever affect the classroom, and we're thrown out to do surgery on somebody's kid. And it's just, we're not prepared. And so we vacillate. Like you said, we're trying to conduct William Tell to our beginners. And you just need a pair loaded with 2 beats drumsticks beating on each other. But I just wanted people to realize what I got from those experiences and what I learned from them. And I appreciate saying that.
The title of the book is Every Day in Every Way. What does that mean to you?
Well, my first 3 years, especially when I moved to Greenwood, that was a storied band program. We had about 160 in the band, 4 on the staff, an ungodly budget back then. And the band was just loose. I had to scream and yell at them, and there's a lot of tradition. And I remember one year we went to band festival, and on the way home, we got stopped by the Lexington Police Department, people throwing stuff out of the bus. And we'd just gotten a standing ovation for marching and made all ones. Well, it was hypocritical. And I mentioned that to one of my friends, and he said, a band that good should be good all year long. And so when I moved to Columbus, I pushed those kids kind of like we did in Greenwood, and it didn't work. So my 5th year teaching, I said, you think we could do this a little bit better? And by my 7th year, I developed this philosophy. We need to be all superior every day of the year in everything that we do. If we're prepared for rehearsals and work like it's the day before contest, ratings will take care of themselves. And that's what I did. I never went to rehearsal ever and said, oh, let's just get through the day. Y'all just sit in the band hall today. Nope. The day of exams, I was pushing them to the last second, saying, memorize this by the time you get back to school, you know. So that's how it came about.
You know, you used to tell me all the time that if you had a choice about your job in life, you'd either be a stand-up comedian or a traveling rock god. Have those choices changed now?
You know, Jim, in total honesty, if I had to live my life over and if I was good enough, I would love to play trumpet for a living. I mean, something about standing in a band, I don't care if there's an audience or not, and playing something through the end of that bell with 9 guys is absolutely magical to me. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. Probably sleep on the road, eat hot dogs to be Tower Power, Chicago, or Blood, Sweat, and Tears, or Huey Lewis. That would have been my dream job. Seriously, that comedian thing is just because I'm always been crazy, and I use humor as much as I could in teaching to disguise discipline. You know, if a kid was doing something over here, I'd look at the best kid in the band. I'd say, Shelby, you need to quit talking right now. And they'd say, I'm not talking. I said, I know you're not, but if I correct you, maybe everybody will get, and before long the kids, and then I would stop and say, what I just did was I avoided confrontation in here by picking a model student. And I'm just trying to get the word out that we don't need that kind of behavior. And most of them bought that I was trying to create an environment rather than a threatening environment.
They understood. I used to say, smart ones help the others. And that would cut down on the talking just immediately. David, where can people buy a copy of your book?
Well, you know, I never meant to sell these books. She's the one that started it, but you can order it from Venmo. It's David Willson at David Wilson with 2 L's, I should say, -27. I have a PayPal account. You can look it up, umwilson@gmail.com. And it's $40 and I'll mail it to you.
Great. Well, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you doing this and how much I enjoyed your book. I'm going to read it again. And, you know, I don't do that with a lot of books. I have Tolkien, but that's you and Tolkien, I think, are right up there together as far as the books go.
Yeah,
But tell Mildred Joan I said hi,
I will.
and I'll contact you soon, and we'll continue this conversation in another Zoom meeting.
Hey, man, you'll never know how much I appreciate it. And I don't know if I'm giving you the right addresses on that, but Venmo's probably the easiest way, or PayPal. And I think I sent you the Venmo information.